This lesson is about keeping the translation clear when retelling the story. Translation is retelling, as exactly as possible, the meaning of the original source text in a way that is natural in the target language. Ellis Dabler, the author of A Translation for Translators, 2008, writes, "The scriptures were originally written in the language of the common people. They were written with the expectation that the recipients could and would understand the meaning clearly." The goals of translation are to translate the source language text so that the message is clear to those that speak the target language, the target language accurately conveys the same meaning it had in the source language, and the target language reads naturally. This lesson will discuss how to do translations that are clear in the target language. Be sure to view the translation guideline lesson on accurate and the lesson on natural for more information. This is an illustration of the translation process. The translator examines the new translation and compares it with the original meaning of the message. There are several things involved with making a clear translation from the source text into your language. I will list them here, and we will look deeper into each of them. You will need to check the pronouns in the source text and make it clear to whom or what each pronoun refers. Be sure you understand who is doing the action. A clear translation will identify the subject that is doing the action and the object that has the action done to it. You will need to change each event idea into an active clause. Change passive verbs to the active form. You will also look at each of phrase to identify the meaning of the possessive construction. Let us start with check the pronouns. You will need to check the pronouns in the source text and make it clear to whom or what each pronoun refers. Pronouns are words that stand in the place of a noun or a noun phrase. They refer back to something that has already been mentioned. In this sentence, the boy ate his dinner. Boy is the noun and his is a pronoun that refers back to the boy. For more information, see the Translation Academy page on English sentence structure and parts of speech. Confusion can arise if it is not clear to whom or what a particular pronoun refers. Compare the following translations of Mark chapter 9, verses 20 and 21. Reading from the Unfolding Word Literal Bible. "And they brought him to him, and when he saw him, straightway the Spirit shook him severely, and he fell on the ground, foaming at the mouth. And he asked his father, How long time has he been like this? And he said, From a child." The pronouns are highlighted. Is it immediately clear who or what each pronoun refers to? It may not be clear to the reader. After studying the passage, we can underline the pronouns that refer to Jesus, put boxes around the pronouns that refer to the child, and circle the pronoun that refers to the Father. The pronoun they refers to the people that brought the boy to Jesus. The unmarked he pronoun refers to the evil spirits in the boy. How can you make this passage more clear in your language? Each language has its own pattern of pronoun reference. Therefore, to avoid confusion, you may sometimes need to use a noun in the translation where the source text has a pronoun. Here is an example of some nouns replacing the pronouns in the Translation for Translators Bible. So they brought the boy to Jesus. As soon as the evil spirit saw Jesus, it shook the boy severely, and the boy fell on the ground. He rolled around, and he foamed at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" He replied, "This started to happen when he was a child." Again, the pronouns are highlighted. The pronoun for the father is circled, and the pronoun in boxes refer to the son. It is now clear that the evil spirit shook the boy. It is also clear that the boy fell on the ground, rolled around, and foamed at the mouth. Beware of going to the opposite extreme by using nouns and noun phrases where it would be more natural to use a pronoun. Remember, always check carefully that it is clear to whom or what each pronoun refers. Next, you need to understand who is doing the action. Check each abstract noun, also known as the event idea or passive verb form, to be sure you understand who is doing the action. A good translation will identify the person or subject who is doing the action and the person or thing, the object that has the action done to them or it. The participants in an event are the people or things which take part in that event. When re-expressing an event idea as a verb, it is often necessary to state who or what are the participants in that event. Usually, this will be clear from the context. Consider the action of this statement. The dog ate the meat. In this sentence, the dog is the subject, the meat is the object, and ate is the action. Since the participants in an event are the people or things which take part in that event, the dog and the meat are the participants. The event is ate. Matthew 24, verse 31 states, "Gather his elect from the four winds." Consider the implied action of the noun phrase of his elect. This phrase could be restated as the people whom God has chosen. Since the participants in an event are the people or things which take part in that event, God and people are the participants. The event is chosen, the past tense of to choose. Remember, a clear translation will identify the participants, the subject that is doing the action, and the object that has the action done to it. To recap what we have covered so far, you will need to check the pronouns in the source text and make it clear to whom or what each pronoun refers. Also, check each event or passive verb to be sure you understand who is involved with the action. Now, let us look at the next item. You will need to change each event idea into an active clause to be sure it is understood. Later, if your language will allow you to change active verbs into event ideas, try to use the noun form. James chapter 4, verse 9 states, "Let your laughter be turned to mourning." The nouns, laughter and mourning, in this example are actually event ideas in the passage. This could be re-expressed, "Don't laugh anymore. Instead, begin to mourn or weep." Notice the noun in the first version is replaced in the simpler version with a verb. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 15 says, "Until the coming of the Lord." This could be re-expressed, "Until the Lord comes." When preparing to translate, it is helpful to look for any event ideas in the passage, especially those which are expressed by some form other than a verb. See if you can re-express the meaning using a verb to express the event idea. This is useful for two reasons. 1. It helps to reveal more precisely the meaning of the source text. The meaning, especially the relationship between ideas, often appears more clearly when the event ideas are expressed as verbs. 2. Often this restructuring will help the translator to find an easier way to express the meaning in the target language. Let us recap what we have covered so far. You will need to check the pronouns in the source text and make it clear to whom or what each pronoun refers. Also, check each abstract noun, also known as the event idea or passive verb form, to be sure you understand who is involved with the action. You should change each event idea into an active clause to be sure it is understood. Now, let's look at the next item. For each passive verb you find in the text, identify the active form as well as the subject and object of the verb. Re-express any passive verbs in the active form. For each passive verb you find in the text, identify the active form as well as the subject and object of the verb. Re-express any passive verbs in the active form. In English, it is possible to say, "John built the house," active form, or "The house was built by John," passive form. In the active form, the subject of the sentence is the person who does the action. In the passive form, the subject of the sentence is the person or thing to which the action is done. Someone else, who is not necessarily named, does the action to that person or thing. Many languages do not have a passive form. Only the active form exists. Therefore, in translating from English, it may be necessary to turn a sentence from the passive form into the active form. See the lesson on active and passive for more information. Consider Mark 1:13. Jesus was tempted by Satan, passive form. This may need to be re-expressed. Satan tempted Jesus. How would you translate this sentence in your language? In the passive form, the person who does the action is not always mentioned. In the active form, the person who does the action is always mentioned. Therefore, in turning a passive form into an active form, it is sometimes necessary to make explicit, that is, to state openly, who did the action. quite often the subject God has to be supplied. For example, Colossians 1:11. May you be strengthened with all power. Or, may God strengthen you with all power. Finally, we will look at the last point. You will also need to look at each of phrase to identify the meaning of the possessive construction. Look at each of phrase to identify the meaning of the possessive construction. In many languages, of constructions are not as frequent as they are in English and Greek. Study the meaning of each one and re-express the meaning of the phrase in a way which makes the relationship between the parts clear. Re-express all event ideas as verbs. For example, consider the phrase, the love of God. Does this mean someone's love for God or God's love for someone? Often, if you take a phrase alone, it is not clear what the meaning is. It could be understood in more than one way. But if you study the context in which it occurs, the correct meaning becomes clear. An examination of the context of each of the following passages shows that in Romans 8:39, the love of God means God's love for us, or how God loves us. In 1 John 5:3, the love of God means our love for God, or how we love God. At first sight, the two phrases appear identical, but when the contexts in which they occur are studied, it becomes clear that they are different. So, the 5 points to remember when translating to keep the translation clear are: check the pronouns, understand the action, change event idea to active, re-express passive verbs, and look at each of phrase. The goal of accurate translations is to translate the meaning of the original message clearly, accurately, and naturally, keeping the author's main focus in mind. This ends this lesson on clear translations. Be sure to view the other lessons on translation guidelines.